This Zoom replay video was originally recorded May 2020, presented by Dr. Valerie Mason John and Tibet House US, Menla Online. To learn about upcoming online and in-person offerings, please visit menla.org.
And just become aware of sounds, smells, touch, perhaps sight, taste. Connect to one of those sense doors to just bring you home to the body. And really appreciate this beautiful body of yours. Yes, every body is beautiful. And this body has carried us this far. So just having some gratitude for this body that has carried us this far in the world. So breathing in kindness, and as we breathe out, breathing out kindness throughout our whole body. And again, just having gratitude for this body, even if the body doesn't work in the way that we want our body to work in, even if the body doesn't look like how we want our body to look, we can still have gratitude for it, gratitude for this body surviving this long and carrying us this far in the world. Give thanks to this body. Yeah. This beautiful body of yours. I'm going to say it again, this beautiful body of yours, or this beautiful body of ours. Each and every one of us has a unique body. There's no such thing as a perfect body. So just having kindness, breathing in kindness and breathing out kindness. And just tuning into how you're feeling right now. And open your eyes. And as you open your eyes, take a good look at yourself. Really take a good look at yourself. Yeah, and just appreciate this being. I just smile at yourself and just appreciate this beautiful being that you're looking at. Go on, take a good look at yourself. Yeah. And I give you the secret of Zoom. If you go into video settings, you can actually airbrush your picture if you want. Touch up your picture, but just, smile and just take a good look at yourself. Okay, so we're going to begin, and I think we've just decided that we'll just let people arrive when they arrive. We won't lock the meeting. And I'm going to share my screen, and we are. Let's see. I just want you to listen.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear.
So Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Yeah. Those of you who are perhaps familiar with the book Alice Miller on the drama of the gifted child will know, well, some of you may not know that the original name of that book was Prisoner of Childhood. And it's really interesting how they changed the name Prisoner of Childhood. And I really want to say in mindfulness, when we think about addiction, we think about trauma, we would say prisoner of the mind. Yeah. And just as Bob Marley, the poet, is to free ourselves from mental slavery, no one but ourselves can free ourselves. And I really, truly believe that it's only us who can actually free ourselves. So I'm going to take us through a short process. I have a PowerPoint. It'll be interactive as well, so it would be great if people could speak in the chat, and I may actually ask some of you to come on and to speak if you want to. So if there's at any time that perhaps you experience some activation or some confusion and you want to speak, please raise your hand, and my support will private message me, and so then I will know to break, and then we can speak. So let's see. So what I wanted to do first is, oh, my PowerPoint isn't working like this. Let's see. Okay. No. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully it's working now. What household did you or your clients grow up in? And it would be really, and these are some of the prompts. And I'm actually having real issues here with my I do it with my mouse pad to actually click on. So we're rolling now. So did you grow up in a household where it was out and shout? Or was it in a household which was talk and salt, fuse and abuse, snitch and bitch? In a household where there was lots of depression, alcoholism, addiction, compulsive behaviors, eating disorders? Did you grow in a household where people were differently abled, physically or emotionally? Did you grow up in a household which was dominated by things like, being a refugee or an asylum seeker? Was you adopted? Did you grow up in a foster home? Was there divorce, demise of a parent, or raised by people who weren't your biological parents? So let's see from some of you, what household did you grow up in? And I'm just trying to find my chat here. Let's make this smaller so that I can see the chat. Okay, chat, okay. So it would be great if some of you wrote into the chat, yeah, fuse and abuse. Anybody else who would like to contribute to it? And I may not have named the kind of household that you grew up in. And if you grew up in a household which was full of love, put that in, because there are some households which are full of love. It doesn't mean to say that there wasn't any trauma in the household, but there were some households which was full of love. So I'm just wondering. Only biological child with 15 adopted siblings. Wow. Yeah. Divorce. Yeah. Somebody connecting. Great to see somebody. Emotionally void. Dad, a narcissist. Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing. And it's always an invitation to share. Let's get rid of this. And so some of you will be aware that I'm talking about the adverse child experience. And it's really important for us to just be aware of this, because I think almost all of us would fall into this adverse child experience, either physical neglect, emotional neglect, medical, dental neglect, educational neglect, all of these things. And if you've had more than 2 of these things, then we are going really quite high up in the trauma world. And the reason why I'm speaking about trauma, because everybody experiences trauma. I mean, you know, it's not possible to live in this world and escape trauma. But not everybody who has trauma has addiction, okay? But everybody who has addiction has trauma. And this is what's really important. Not everybody who has trauma has addictions, but everybody who has addictions has trauma. And that's often because those people perhaps who don't have addictions, who perhaps experience trauma, was most probably able to talk to somebody about it. There was somebody who they could speak to. There was somebody who could hear them, somebody who didn't tell them they were lying. Yeah. You know, sometimes we can have things happen to us and we speak to an adult and we're told, don't say anything, keep it a secret. Or we're told, you're lying, it's not true. Or we're told, well, you know, I hear you, but you can't say anything because it will break up the family. And this is the trauma which really is going to impact the adaptive behavior of addiction. So, you know, before I go into mindfulness, I just really want to look at the different models there are out there, because whenever we go to a clinician, or if we go to a 12-step meeting, or we go to a Buddhist recovery meeting, people are coming from different models, okay? And we know that if we go to a psychiatrist, it's very much considered a disease model, yeah? We have the choice model, and that's not so much saying that people are choosing to be alcoholics or addicts. It's that thing of actions have consequences, that we, you know, somehow we chose alcohol. What is it that some of us can grow up in the same household, and yet one person will be into church and will be a born-again Christian, another person will be an alcoholic, another person will be a compulsive overeater, and another person, maybe in inverted commas, might be called a normie. And what is it, you know? And so it's not saying that this model is that nobody chooses to be an addict or an alcoholic or compulsive overeater. Yeah. The self-medication model, which is really interesting, because I think, you know, many of us who have addictions, we found a way to self-medicate, you know. I mean, what's the difference from somebody who goes to the doctor and says, I'm really struggling with depression, and the doctor writes out a prescription for Prozac, for somebody who perhaps at home is suffering from depression and thinks, I'll use marijuana, or, you know, or I use heroin, okay? So, you know, why is one way better than the other, you know? So, and it's always really important, because I think it's working with addiction, it is so important to have compassion. In fact, even coming back to the disease model, where I connect with it, with the disease model, is that I often see that my addiction is in remission, okay? It's in remission, just as if I had cancer. It can go into remission. You know, one is never really seen as completely free of cancer, but it goes into remission. And I really do think and believe that those of us who manage to find some sobriety, some abstinence, it goes into remission. And at any time it could flare up. It could flare up again. Yeah. So this is really important, because the addiction world has really finally got it, that actually It's the biopsychosocial plus model. And that plus is really important, because what it's saying is that plus is it's the cultural and the spiritual. And in fact, I have a friend who is a judge. She was one of the first actually queer judge actually in one of the provinces in Canada. And in her first year of becoming a judge, she went to judge school. They go to judge school every year. And do you know what was the most successful recovery program? The most successful recovery program was the Indigenous recovery program. Not 12 steps, you might think 12 steps, but it was the Indigenous, because it had the spiritual and it had the cultural, and it included all those ways of being. And so now that more and more people are jumping on board, that we can't just say we're going to come from the disease model, or we're going to come from the choice model. We have to really integrate all of this. And when we're working with somebody, we need to take into account the biological, the psychological, the social, the cultural, and the spiritual. So just now, moving on, Bruce Alexander has several ways of how just how society has worked with drugs. Yeah, and of course we're talking. Addiction is more than drugs. But let's looking at drugs and the war on drugs, and that very much about punishing the drug user. So it's punishing the alcoholic, it's punishing the gambler, that it's very punitive. It's almost as if, why can't these people get over it? There is a real punishing way. Why can't these people just get over it? Again, there is this medical approach, and just where people would just treat the biology or the chemistry. But it's not. When we're working with addiction, the question is, and this is a question that Dr. Gabor Mate speaks about, and you may hear some flavor of Dr. Gabor Mate in my presence, because I work very closely with Gabor on the compassionate inquiry, and very much influenced with his thinking. But the question, or what we need to be working is, why the addiction? Why the addiction? For me, with my addiction, it wasn't just enough to work with the actual substance. It was like, why the addiction? Nobody ever, when I think about it, my addictions, I was I was a champagne Charlie girl, as we would say in England. I live in Canada now. But my core addiction was, I was a chronic anorectic bulimic. Nobody ever asked me why I was a bulimic. Nobody ever asked me that question. Yeah. Okay. So then we have people who say the libertarian approach, let's eliminate both the punishment and treatment and allow addicted people to respond to the natural consequences of their lifestyles. And I suppose in a way, this is where kind of self-medication can come in, that there are many people who manage to go under the radar, manage to escape being punished, manage to escape treatment. Yeah. And then there is the harm reduction model. I'm really in favor of the harm reduction model. The reality is that people are always going to die from addiction. We can never prevent it, and that's one of the arguments. Harm reduction, people will die. Well, we know if it's total abstinence, people can die. We know actually that one of the highest mortality rates from addictions is when somebody's been in a recovery house and they come out, and in that first month they come out, they score, they think they can take as much as what they could do, and they take it and they end up dead. Yeah. And so and I know for myself that actually it was harm reduction. I wouldn't, I never had that traditional way of recovering, but what I was doing was harm reduction. And finally, I was able to let go. Yeah. So here we have the whole recovery movement, the 12-step recovery. And I really, you know, for me, I have so much gratitude for the 12-step movement, because once upon a time, for people who were alcoholics, it was either the asylum or the prison or the streets. And, you know, 12 steps, the 12-step program has saved many, many people's lives. But we also know that that for some people it hasn't worked, that, you know, one approach isn't a panacea. And in fact, if you think about it, I can remember you working in the education system when everybody was saying, oh, the different learning types, there are so many different learning types, and we have to get to know the different learning types. Well, we have to get to know that actually there are different ways to recover, and it isn't one way. And the person who has to be the agent of their recovery is us. We cannot tell somebody this is the way they have to recover. We have to say what we want and what works for us. And you know, maybe we might make the wrong decision. As my teacher always says, every decision is a good decision. You can always make a new decision. Okay. So, and then we have the meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. And so this is where we come into the approach of mindfulness, because what I want to say to you is that I got my recovery in the rooms of mindfulness. I got my recovery in the rooms of meditation. And I did have therapy. In fact, I worked with a Buddhist therapy, and so it was very integrative. But I will say that that last part, I really did have to have some specialized treatment. I had to have some specialized treatment. I could, you know, I was able, you know, I was a big Charlie girl. I was big. But when I was ready to let go, I could let go. But in terms of the food, in terms of the bulimia, forget it. I couldn't. And I had to have that extra help. And that extra, so I had specialized help using the, using mindfulness with that specific help. Anyway, this is one of my favorite verses. It makes me laugh every time I think about it, you know. And this isn't to say, those of you who are parents, this isn't to say that you are bad parents, you know, because, you know, it's like, who parented us? It's all about intergenerational trauma. And if we can just acknowledge that actually those of us, I'm not a parent, but I've worked with young people and I've made my mistakes, you know. And basically the real recovery is the healing that we can do. You know, I work with parents, and it's just amazing that, okay, so they've got to this point, okay, so they may have had a chronic addiction, so okay, that may have had an impact on their children, but the fact that they're doing the work, things are beginning to change. So meditate or medicate. Let's just take a pause. This is how I used to begin my day. I used to begin my day with a cigarette, a cup of coffee, and maybe a line. That's how I began my day. Yeah. And I told me it helped me go to toilet in the morning. It helped me have my bowel movements in the morning. So, you know, I could find all those justifications. I now begin my day with a liter of water and meditation. How did I get there? The only thing that I can say with the cigarette, I've still, this is proof that I was a smoker. I've still got that muscle. Doesn't go, I've still got that muscle there. But one of the things about with the cigarette is, that's why I smoked. Because it was pausing. We don't do these things, you know, we don't do these things for no reason. That cigarette just allowed me to pause. It settled me. because every day I woke up, I was completely dysregulated. I needed something to settle me. Yeah. So those of you, I don't know if those of you on the call who perhaps do still smoke, you might need to think about that, you know, why are you smoking? Because often, you know, something happens and you hear people say, I just need a cigarette, because the cigarette will regulate you, you know? Yeah. Okay. So all addictions are attempts to soothe the pain. Why the pain? This is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Why the pain? And all of your stories will be very, very different. But just why wouldn't we want to soothe the pain? Who here doesn't want to soothe the pain? Why wouldn't we want to soothe the pain? Of course we're going to want to soothe the pain. You know, you have a toothache, what do? You have a toothache, you're desperate. It's the only time we want to go to the dentist, you know, when we're in pain, because we're desperate and we're hoping that the dentist will put us out of pain. And so if we're in mental pain, we're going to be desperate. If we're in physical pain, we're going to want to soothe the pain. There's nothing wrong with wanting to soothe the pain. Addictions begin with pain and end with pain. I would also say that actually addictive behavior can also begin with pleasure. You know, there are many of us who find it incredibly difficult to be with pleasurable experience. And some of you might want to ask yourself right now, how easy do you find it to be with pleasurable experience? Okay, how many of you turn away from a pleasant experience? You know, you could be out with your friends having a good time and think, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a drink? Or you could be eating something and before you're enjoying the meal, and before you've even finished the meal, you're thinking about what else next you can eat. This is you turning away from a pleasurable experience, you know? There's times when I'm having a really great day, I'm really having a really wonderful time, and it's like I want to put something else in my mouth. I want to enhance that, you know? I can't just stay with the pleasurable. And so it can begin with pleasure and end up with pain too. And I'll say a bit more because sometimes people can be a bit confused by this. Those of us who have experienced sexual assault will know that many of us may really have real trauma and real thoughts of guilt because we experienced some pleasure when our body was touched. We know that when our body is touched in a particular way, it will respond in a particular way. We have no control how that body is going to respond. And if that's been your experience, you can be hardwired that actually pleasant is dirty. You're not going to want to allow yourself to experience the pleasant or the pleasurable. You want to get out of there because it will have a memory, because it will re-stimulate. And that person who was sexually assaulted, inappropriately touched as a child, will be there, bang, in the present, right now, 20, 30 years later, if we haven't been able to release that, it will be there because it's just so, it's not safe to experience pleasure. Yeah. All contortions we go through not to be ourselves for a few hours. Yeah, from the Rolling Stones. Yeah. So in mindfulness, and this is, you know, from the famous Tibetan Book of the Dead, whatever you do, don't try and escape the pain. Yeah. And whatever we do, don't try and escape the pleasurable either. You know, we have to learn to just be with what is. You know, it's like we know if something's pleasurable is gonna, it's happening in our experience. We don't need to move away from it. It's not going to last. It's going to change. And just how painful experiences won't always last. You know, those of you who are fully formed adults, you know, those of you here who are in your 30s and 40s, do you remember your first heartbreak? Is it still hurting you now, your first heartbreak? But when you were in your first heartbreak, can you remember how painful it was? Oh my God, many of you would have been suicidal. Oh my God. And even after your first heartbreak, other heartbreaks, can you remember what that was like? And yet today, what was that about? It's gone. Yeah. We don't always have to be in the pain. We don't have to escape the pain. And the thing is, when we try and escape experience, we're just going to compound it. We're just going to create more pain. We're just going to add pain onto us. So so how do we stay with experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And this is a really important teaching. In the field of mindfulness, there are only 3 feelings. How liberating is that? Often we say, you know, I feel unlovable, I feel rejected, I feel abandoned. These aren't feelings. These are stories. That might be your experience, that you were abandoned, but they're not feelings. And this is really important because, you know, if we say that they are feelings, we're so identified with them, nobody can take them away. Yeah. And we have to really understand that when we say we feel abandoned, what is the story? What is that story? That is, you know, what has happened is there's been an experience of unpleasantness and we've made it mean I'm abandoned. It might be one of our life sentences. I call them life sentences. Some people call them core beliefs. You know, a life sentence, one of my life sentences used to be I'm unlovable. So something, it may be I'd be walking along the road and somebody didn't say hello to me and I would go into I'm unlovable, because this was one of my life sentences. But what had happened is I'm walking along the road, I wave, hey, to somebody. They don't wave back. There's an unpleasant experience arising in my body. And to deal with it, I just say, oh, I'm unlovable. Okay. So what we're saying is in mindfulness, 3 feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And all 3 of them are triggers. In fact, the biggest trigger is neutral. Those of you who have raised kids or worked with kids or even been a kid, you remember, oh, I'm bored. Oh, I'm bored. You know, that's the neutral place. Nothing much happening. So for those people who are new in recovery, when we're new in recovery, you know, we've had maybe a month, 2-month abstinence, things are getting a bit boring. Do you know what I mean? It's like, because, you know, when we were in our hell realm of addictive behaviors, whatever it will be, whether it's porn, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether it's codependency, because, you know, let me tell you that a shot of heroin can release the same amount of endorphin as thinking about somebody who you fancy. Okay, can be released the same amount of endorphin from winning, you know, if you've been gambling, from release the same amount of endorphins looking at porn. Okay, so, you know, we need to be really aware of these addictive behaviors, these addictive behaviors, which will be triggered by the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And just coming back to where I was saying that actually for that's where I was going with that actually our life is quite dramatic. It's quite dramatic when we're in our realm of addiction. And for those of us, some of us may have grown up in households which were pretty dramatic, which were pretty dysfunctional, which was all this stuff going on. So myself, I used to think that I could only do well out of chaos. I really believed that you would get the best out of me out of chaos. So I would deliberately create chaos. And many of us will deliberately create chaos. And so those people who are new into recovery, the chaos is gone. Things are running along smoothly. This doesn't feel comfortable. It's kind of quite neutral. Let's spice it up a bit, and we pick up. Okay. So these feelings, free feelings, is to begin to get literate in these free feelings. So how do we work? How do we work with those thoughts that bully us? This negative self-talk, because often underneath all those addictive behaviors, it's so common. I have people who've been alcoholics for years, and they let go of the alcohol and they're left with having to deal with the depression, which is why some people don't let go, because who's going to be holding the depression? When I was able to finally let go of the food, finally let go of my main addictive behaviors, I could clearly see that my biggest addiction was my stinking thinking. I used to tell myself I hated myself 10 to a dozen. Yeah. And what mindfulness, the whole, Dr. Gabor says that, addiction is a disconnection to the self. And what mindfulness is doing is coming home to the self, coming home to the body. Because many of us have left the body. Just imagine, just imagine after this webinar, you go out to the shops because you need some groceries, you need something. And when you return, you can't find your way home. Just imagine what that would be like. It'd be completely traumatic. You tried all these different ways and you couldn't find your way home. Well, what I want to say to you is that those of us who have addictions, we cannot find our way home. We're trying to find our way home, but addiction is all about the addictive. It's moving away from our experience, moving away from experience happening in the body, moving away perhaps from those thoughts that have been beating ourselves up. It's about getting high, about having altered states. It's about turning away from our experience. And this is why mindfulness is so hard and so activating, because what we're saying is about coming back to the body, coming back to the thoughts. So I'm actually going to, because I'm aware of time, I am actually going to invite you to ask questions. And at this point, I'm actually going to ask if the recording could be turned off, because this part is confidential and it's only for the people who are here. So if we could have actually, maybe I can stop recording because I have hosting.
I can pause it as well, Valerie.
Yeah.
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa membership community. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, please visit tibethouse.us. Tashi Delek, and thanks for tuning in.